just finished one, right? And there should be all the energy, at a high level, and we had that. And the question is always going to be for the guys, as I just addressed them, is can they sustain it? That's what it was in January when they brought the intensity, and early on you could tell these guys were determined, and that's been the challenge to them. Question I keep asking them and ask them again, and it's the season, it's a practice, it's a play, it's sustaining the intensity at the level from start to finish. But good day, and open for questions.
How did Deontay look getting back on the field and playing with that brace? But how did he look?
Yeah. He's his trajectory is going up. Deontay, his leadership is the thing I think that's really come out. So that's exciting. He is going to be limited, and just the number of reps, the volume, I guess the best way to put it, and what he can take as expected. And that was going to be the plan, just with his timeline from the beginning. But it's great having him out there. I think he feels really good about being out there, mentally and physically. I think he's in a really good spot. But there's still progress to be made as we build for the first game.
Stand on the brace topic. Can you talk about Jaylen Hale's progress?
Yeah, just Jaylen Hale and, where he was at a year ago with the injury actually in the spring in 2024. Just, pretty significant injury at the time. And, between he and then our medical staff just doing an awesome job of pushing forward. Our whole team is proud of him, not just me. We've talked about that in the winter, during December. I remember addressing it with the team, guys being excited about having him out there, finally doing something with the team. And then, the spring was the next step, and through the summer, and him out there. But there's reps that he hasn't taken, banked reps that other guys have, and so he's still learning as we go. And every rep he's going to get more and more confident, but he's certainly got a lot of tools, and want to see his growth. Excited about that this fall.
After the first day, is there a certain position group that maybe surprised you today?
Surprise! It's hard because we're literally in spider pads and helmets, and so from a physicality standpoint and things like that, there's limitations on what you can see and do. But I think as expected, I thought. I think our defensive backfield is, but that's expected. And so, I thought it was just good back and forth, as it should. I feel like we got for the most part, a balanced team. And so it didn't feel like one position completely dominated another, or one was, getting dominated. So I thought it was a good balance across the board as a team.
Can you break down each of the quarterbacks and how you saw what you saw out there?
Yeah. I think they've all taken steps through the summer, and you can see they are definitely more comfortable with the install. A lot of it's the reps they get with the play concepts they have, but the footwork and just the confidence with that. And, some of the new things that we've added in. So Ty and Austin, those things are still new this spring. And, they've now become very comfortable with, and it's subtle stuff, but probably Keelan's going to be the one that, you're going to see the biggest jump naturally. And, I feel like that was good. I mean, he's making quick decisions and not sitting there thinking too much. But I felt all of them did. I think Ty, we've talked about all the quarterbacks, but, just the gimme, the ones that are just should be 100% making those plays all the time. And I really felt like, he did that. He got probably more opportunities just because of the way the plays developed to have more of those gimmies, and those gimmies add up. Gimmies are 5-yard gains that turn into 15 and 20 and sometimes explosives, and they keep the chains moving. So I like the mindset of our quarterbacks, because when you can trust your quarterback to go through his progression and be okay with checking it down and not forcing something, you can call, as a play caller, a lot more balls down the field, and know that it's not just going to be an incomplete pass or an explosive play. There's going to be a progression, and it's going to be some type of movement down the field. It's going to put you in manageable down and distances, whether it's second, third, or fourth.
Piggybacking off of that, do you change the way you approach rep distribution with the quarterbacks, knowing it's a different timeline than it was in the spring?
We'll start out pretty consistent with probably how we finished the spring. And again, Keelan's reps continue to build up at, from what it was in spring, where he was primarily with, the threes and fours. But, here early on, you're just installing and you're trying to give each quarterback, along with each other position and player, the reps of the install. And then, once you get past that first kind of round of installs, then you really start kind of probably dialing it in at that time. But we'll play it by ear as we go, because if someone separates themselves, 1-2 guys, then you do make adjustments along the way.
Is all the experience that you've got coming back on defense, and I realize it's just one practice, but does it show up pretty quick?
Yes, there is definitely the veterans and then the younger guys, and the veterans, it starts with communication and the confidence with that communication, and just, guys in sync, right? Knowing the space that they got to cover between two guys in the secondary or the back half. And you can just see the gelling of that. And they're really, I can't really think of anything where it felt like there was a missed assignment, or something that was blown, really all day. And our offense does a lot of stuff to put a lot of pressure on you to communicate, to have to see motions and shifting and things like that. So, from where we were at a year ago or even end of the season, you can see the banked reps that we've taken adding up. And then, the physical piece will continue to happen as we put on the pads and add that part to it.
First year or two, no transfers. Did it feel like today, all right, we've got some continuity compared to what you saw last year?
So what was the first part?
No transfers, just getting guys back in your system, a little bit more familiarity. Did you kind of feel that continuity today, even day one?
Yeah, I mean, it's just even the logistics of how you practice and, the transitions and where guys go, the flow is just, on another level. And, it's even going to be much better than it was at the end of the fall because you still had the spring. And so, just locations on the field and who you're going to and those drills. And, now it isn't just those drills you're learning. You're learning the details and, the details and how they apply to the play. And, you're not just doing that drill on its own and it's isolated. It's how it's going to affect you when you're in this situation, maybe 5-10 times throughout the season, but you can apply it because we've shown it and now they remember and they've processed it and now they can go operate and execute.
Where's the tight ends?
Go ahead.
Where's the tight ends from that health-wise?
It will continue to get better and better. It's in a good spot. This was going to be how it was when the injuries happened. Cuevas is going to continue to add volume. I think that's the best word to use because he's practicing. Danny Lewis, the same thing. They're adding volume. The number of reps from start to finish. It's not just team. It's not just individual. But they've had a really good summer, and their progress is as we had hoped, as we expected. And the rest of the guys, Marshall, I know didn't practice at the end of the spring with what he had. A couple other guys too. They're all full go. We got more tight ends out there now all of a sudden than we could have ever imagined. But they all competing and working together, doing a good job.
Coach, Travis Hunter was a big story last year, of course, being a full-time two-way player. I was wondering if you had ever had or do you have players that, not full-time, but spot duty on the other side for emergencies or something, or too many disadvantages?
Yeah, no, I mean, when you have someone that can really fit into a goal line package and be the extra tight end and maybe take a defensive end or a defensive lineman and add him, to a personnel grouping, we'll certainly be open to that. Or if there's, a specific guy that has just a skill that, we don't have. But I think for the most part, each side of the ball has what they need. If they wanted to do something special, we have that on that side of the ball. And there isn't someone that is so much better going both ways like that situation to where we feel the need to do that at this point.
How big of a luxury is it when you look at a quarterback competition going up against a defense that's got so much experience?
Yeah, a lot of the competition right now is a lot of pressure on them. There's pressure to play in games and the quarterback pressure that exists, going through the season. But really, the pressure that they have to compete and win the spot is something that's preparing them for those times in the games. And so going against a defense like ours and, our defense does a really good job. I think they're getting better and better at disguising things, which means you don't know where things might always come from. And then, guys just that are playmakers out there too. They can cover a lot of ground, and they're not just giving you those gimmies, those blown coverages. You're having to make plays, and so quarterbacks did a good job of, I think, taking calculated risks at the right time. They didn't put our offense in jeopardy really, throughout practice. And they're being challenged by obviously a group on the other side of the ball that we've, got a lot of confidence in right now.
Coach, speaking about competition, can you talk about the running back position and how it's looking behind Jam Miller?
Mm-hmm.
Just the different body types and the different backs back there. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, you got Rich and you got Rich Young, Daniel Hill coming back also. Feel like those guys are healthier than they probably ever were last season throughout the year. And then Dre Washington, I thought he had a really nice practice today. You can see, again, a new guy that's come in, and now you're seeing the install a second, third time from spring, summer to fall. And how, just like we were talking about the quarterback position, how it's clicking more, and so he's got himself right in the mix there for sure. As we kind of narrow down, and there's skill sets, there's different things that each guy brings. Body types are a little bit different, but in the end, it's not like someone is so much different to where it affects who's in there. We're just teaching them all the offense, and especially when we get into the padded and the physicality and the tackling pieces, that's a big part of it, is breaking tackles and being able to get in there and protect for the quarterback and do a great job of it. So, really, they're all competing, but really that's probably where it's at with those guys, and they're all doing a good job.
Saw Gino get first team reps at left guard today. I mean, where do you see that kind of position?
Gino,
Cam.
and Cam, yeah, both of them doing a great job all summer. Super competitive. Gino, in year 2 now with us, so comfortable in the offense. And Cam has just he's had a lot of urgency to really put himself physically and mentally in a spot where he's competing for that position. And they probably do have different tools that are their strengths. I think they're both really good, well-rounded football players. But both of them can do a few things a little better than the other. So, it's just a matter of the best 5 guys, and how they fit into that.
Coach, speaking from a special team standpoint, can you just talk about anybody who stepped up since, you just lost a great one to James Burnham, but can you just talk about the people that's still in the room, people that's come behind him,
Mm-hmm.
what you've seen so far from spring to summer to now, and just elaborate on that.
Sure. Specialists as a whole, we had a lot of special teams guys, and I know you're not what your question is, that freshmen that played a lot of reps, on the units, and the specialists though, all graduating on, obviously got some holes there, and I felt good about what you see with the long snapper position and the replacement there. And then, I think Talty's done a really nice job. I'm proud of him on how he's really, from last year, taken on the role and dove into it, did a nice job on kickoffs. And I think that experience and just his growth showed, again, consistency through the spring. And then, it was evident today. I thought he was solid in the different times we had him out there doing his thing. And the punter position is probably the one that is the most open, where, you got a couple guys, Alex and Blake that, both coming into the program that, Blake in particular had some reps this spring, but still, growing and getting stronger, and those 2 guys competing. Alex is now physically in a better spot too, and his progress is, I guess, better than expected. From a physical standpoint, just being able to go out there and do it. And so I'm excited about the competition that those 2 will bring, because I know that the ceiling for them, they got pretty high ceilings, and so I'm expecting some big things from them.
Speaking of special teams, who are you working with for Holder?
A lot of times it's within that unit, so you're going to have your punters a lot of time, and I thought Blake did a nice job today. Anderson does a nice job too, and so a lot of times because they're together so much, if as long as they can do it, that's just that familiarity and that consistency with all the reps they take each and every day. That's the starting point for us. But I always like to, at some point, get a quarterback involved or some skill guy. Puts a little pressure on the other team when you got that ability there too to have a playmaker, holding the football. But we'll see as we go through the fall. All right, thank you guys. Yep.